Good afternoon, everyone. What is it? What? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right, I'm so happy to be here with such an amazing audience of South by Southwest people and educators. And so before we consider the future of teacher professional development together, I want to start with a powerful quote from an amazing educator, Miss Crystal M. Watson, who was interviewed for our Teaching Lab series called Power of a Black Teacher. And I want to shout out to Tamala Wiley. Tamala, raise your hand. She's on our team. Tamala is the one who innovated and interviewed all the teachers for this amazing series. All right, so Miss Watson says, "Love is an action in the words of bell hooks. It is a verb. It is not a noun. I can tell you I love you all day long, but if I don't show you through practice, then that word, it starts to diminish. So if I come into my classroom saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, but I don't have high expectations because I don't believe you can do it. If I tell you to leave your culture and your family at the door because it's school and we don't have time. If I don't ask for your opinion on my instructional practices, or if I don't ask you how well you're learning in my class, or what I can do to help you along individually. If I don't share your data with you in a meaningful way, I cannot continue to tell you I love you, and for you to continue to believe it." Now, the goal of our educational system should be to have all teachers learn to be like Miss Watson, learn to connect their passion, their love, to actual instructional moves. And we do have structures for learning in our schools and school systems, and oftentimes these structures are called PD, or professional development. And I'm here today because we want to explore some questions around whether or not these existing structures are really enough to meet the current demands of this era. So I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm the mother of a 6-year-old son. I'm an educator, and I'm the leader of Teaching Lab. And when I'm not hanging out with my 6-year-old son, I'm thinking about teacher learning all the time. So before we can answer how can we save teacher PD, we really need to ask, can we save it? And also, should we save it? I believe we can, and we must. But in order to do so, we need a true paradigm shift in the ways that we understand how teachers and students learn together. And the really good news is we believe that it's happening right now because we see it happening every day in our work with Teaching Lab, with teachers across the nation. And today I want to enlist everybody here in this room in leading it too, because it really is all of our work. So a little bit about me. I loved being a high school science teacher. And two things that I loved teaching about were paradigm shifts and ecosystems. And then there's one subject in particular that combined both of these components, and this was also one of my favorite things to teach. So this subject was about forest ecosystems. So scientists used to think that trees were Darwinian loners, just standing there alone in a forest, competing with each other for resources. But actually, they've since learned that trees are interconnected underground. They're connected by root and fungal networks. And not only do they communicate using these networks, they actually also share nutrients. And they'll do things like if there's an insect attack or disease, they'll send out distress signals too. And if you're a teacher, you know these moments. But I remember I had a student, Kiona, who, when she learned about this, she stared off into space and said, "It really is like everything is connected." This is a beautiful moment of realization that we all know as teachers. But she wasn't just describing the fundamental characteristic of what's happening with trees and these underground root networks. I think she was also describing the fundamental character of this new paradigm that we're talking about. So I think what she's describing is that we first need to see and then value some of the connections that are already there. So let me say a little bit more about what I mean. When I was a teacher, this is me as a teacher in Oakland, California, outside in a garden with students. And when I was a teacher, PD was a dirty word. And when people said PD, you've got to go to PD, we would literally groan. But that didn't mean my learning and development wasn't important. I was hungry to learn and grow. But that's actually also not the point. The point is that my lack of support actually impacted my students. I remember when one of my really exceptional students called me from college, and she was really upset because she was struggling with college-level writing. And what she said is burned into my memory. She said, "Why didn't anyone teach me how to write?" And if you looked at my classroom as a high school science teacher, from the outside looking in, you might say, "Wow, what an engaging classroom, this is awesome." But when I look back on it now, I can admit, and it's difficult to admit, but I can admit that I missed opportunities to do what Miss Watson advises us to do, which is to truly connect that I love you, I care about you, to instructional practices that truly advance learning for all students and allow them to be successful. But here's the thing. I went to good schools, I had a master's degree in education, but no one, not ever, taught me about the science of how people learn and grow and develop. And what's really unfortunate is that at times in some of these PD sessions, I was taught to use the opposite of what science would suggest to be true. I was taught that explicit instruction is always negative for students. I was taught to analyze student data, totally divorced from practice. I was also taught superficial classroom management techniques over deep, culturally responsive practices. And this is what's wrong with the whole system. We are not embracing that teacher learning is inextricably linked to student learning. And if I didn't know what to do, how would my students know? Making this connection, we think, is how we make love an action across an entire system. So what are the characteristics of this current paradigm? People here maybe have heard the stats before. We spend about $18 to $20 billion on teacher professional development every year. That's $6,000 per teacher. And it doesn't work, and teachers hate it, right? Well, that's partly true. But actually, evidence suggests that if it's done right, professional development is not a waste of time and money, but can actually have a benefit for teachers and for the students in their classroom. The problem is it's not happening at scale. So we gotta ask, what are we saving PD from? We believe that the efficacy and impact of our current system is hobbled by three things: disconnection, irrelevance, and inequity. So in order to reinforce disconnection across our systems, what we do is we track teacher attendance and teacher time in PD, and overly focusing on mechanical inputs as opposed to the outputs of our system, it makes teachers feel like, I don't care what you're learning, I only care that you're compliant. What reinforces irrelevance across our system is that we tell teachers to embrace the latest fad or silver bullet in education. And I'm telling you, I can't make this up right now. Yesterday, someone that I know in education, she texted me and said, "It seems like continuous improvement is on its way out. What's next?" And I think this is really emblematic of this type of silver bullet thinking. And more importantly, what it makes teachers feel like is it doesn't matter who your students are, just do this new thing. And then finally, the way we reinforce inequity across our system is we treat racial and economic disparities as inevitable. And what we hear from teachers, particularly teachers of color, is that they feel like any focus on culturally responsive teaching or evidence-based practices is a box-checking exercise, as opposed to something deep and ongoing, a process. And the message that this sends is very dangerous. The message this sends is we can't work in this system if we care about equity. So where are we going to find the will to make this necessary paradigm shift? I think it begins with this quote: "We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to know in order to do this. Whether we do it, finally, depends on how we feel about the fact that we haven't done so far. So this was said by Ron Edmonds, who advocated for a paradigm shift in how we dismantle educational racism to support Black children. He wrote this quote all the way back in 1987. And one thing that he knew then, that we know now, is that teachers have a profound impact on student learning and on advancing educational equity. And if we don't want this quote to be true 30 years from now, we need to embrace this. We need to embrace what we've known for a long time, that if we're not taking teacher learning seriously, we're not actually taking student learning seriously. And of course, we know many different teachers, school leaders, system level leaders, and incredible people across the country who are taking this seriously. And it's through their work that we actually find hope for this paradigm shift. We also feel the weight that families feel across the nation as they recover physically, emotionally, and economically from the pandemic, but we also feel the resilience. And if you want to go see some resilience right now, go visit some schools. Because what we see when we visit schools are students ready to go, ready to learn, more often than not. I live in New York City, and we have partnerships in the Bronx, and I was just there recently visiting schools, and I saw every single student I saw was excited to engage with what the teachers put in front of them. And this aligns with research that shows that students will rise to the challenge when teachers give them demanding assignments. And this also aligns with a radical value that we have at Teaching Lab. We believe that literally any child can learn anything if provided with the right opportunities and support, including building on their cultural and linguistic funds of knowledge. And if we operate from this as a first premise, then we have to ask difficult questions like Ron Edmonds asked. We have to ask, why is it that only 40% of fourth graders read on grade level? It's because not enough of us are being serious about what it will take to make this happen. And so the radical premise that all students can learn and achieve the highest expectations must actually also apply to educators. We must first start from the premise that teachers can learn and grow like anyone else, and they actually deserve our support. And what's really important to know as well is that teachers can learn and grow at any point in their careers. It's a persistent myth that this only applies to early career teachers. Again, if we take student learning seriously, we're taking teacher learning seriously. So now imagine you're an educator in the classroom right now, and we're telling you, accelerate student learning, attend to student trauma, attend to student social and emotional learning, and by the way, do all those other things that teachers do. Make copies, write your own lesson plans, grade hundreds maybe of assignments without any extra time. How are we going to support teachers through this new era and use it as a paradigm shifting moment? We believe this new paradigm will demand more and different thinking and commitments across our schools and systems. And we believe this shift is possible because, again, we see teams of teachers leading this work. And we hear their voices, and they're reflected in what we call at Teaching Lab, head, heart, habits, and equity. So when we actually ask teachers these questions, here's what they tell us. So when we ask teachers, how do we get evidence into practice? They tell us, please, treat us like professionals. And in our professional learning sessions, one of the most common pieces of feedback we get is thank you for explaining the why behind my work. So teachers want to know the why behind why they would use one practice over another, one curriculum over another. When we ask teachers, how do we strengthen teacher relationships and networks so that they benefit from each other's expertise? They tell us they need more time. They need more time together to learn from each other. They want more leadership development opportunities, and they want more coaching focused on their areas of improvement. But importantly, they really want to help identify those areas of improvement. And when we ask teachers, how do we engage in ongoing learning, continuous improvement? They tell us they want to engage in scientific processes so that they can test something out that they're learning and figure out whether or not it's working, but they want it to be hyper-relevant. They want it to be connected to what they actually teach, their lessons, their content, their curriculum. And when we ask teachers, how can we actually support you, really support you in eliminating the racial inequities in our school systems, they say they want to teach the truth. And they want to do whatever they can to ensure every student learns on grade level and pursues their dreams. And they even tell us that when it's organized effectively, they want to interrogate their biases, and they want to connect those mindset shifts to practice shifts. And so if we really listened and put these reflections into practice, we believe we could create the system that you see here. So a system where teacher learning actually translates into transformational outcomes for students. So obviously, a major part of this paradigm shift we're advocating for is listening and learning from educators on the ground. But we are also all captives of our own experiences. And so learning from evidence building and science is important too. I referenced my 6-year-old son at the beginning. And as we were walking home from school the other day, he told me that he loves both art and science because they're both about creating things. It's a good one. And what we believe is that if we're really going to create together, we need that childlike openness to both art and science. We need to learn from students, teachers, our local communities, and we need to learn from advances in scientific research. That's why I'm also excited about this movement we're a part of, which is called the Research Partnership for Professional Learning. If you look that up, you can get access to this report, Dispelling the Myths. And I referenced some of the myths in this presentation, but you can read about all the myths here. And so in nature, we observe seasons, evolutions, paradigm shifts, but in our work, given the stakes and the persistence of our inequitable systems and the impact that those have on our children, we must compel one, all of us. At Teaching Lab, we spend our time living into this new paradigm, shaping it, and betting on its powers for transformation. And we believe, alongside our partners, that we can and must shift the paradigm in order to move closer to educational justice. But in order to do this, we also have to acknowledge that our fates are tied together. And as Gwendolyn Brooke, who is a teacher and a poet, says, Gwendolyn Brooke says, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond. And if we are each other's business, we need to acknowledge that teacher learning matters for the humanity and future of our profession, the learning of our children, and the equity of our systems. And so, as I did when I started our work here today, I'm going to close with a clip from our Power of a Black Teacher series. And you can use this QR code to see all of these powerful testimonies on our YouTube channel. And I'm looking forward to your questions after we play this short clip.
You got to interrogate your own beliefs and beliefs about students in the classroom. Like, culture responsive practice is not just these actions, but it is truly a belief. And you have to believe that this is the best for our students. It is the best specifically for our BIPOC students. And that's where they have to start. Like, I can give you all the tools. I can give you a strategy. I can give you a lesson plan. But if you don't truly believe it, it's going to show up in your practice. And it's going to show up and your kids are going to experience that on the other end.
Thank you so much, everybody.